All right. I noticed we got quite a crowd here, and I got a feeling it has something to do with Edgewood Road. I'm going to tell you the first case we're going to propose is going to be the rezoning of the property. This will have nothing to do with the cell tower, so this is to bring the club into compliance with what it's doing now. So we're going to hear this case first, and then we'll hear the special exception case after that. So if you would, just keep that in mind when your comments are brought forward. Okay, we'll listen to this case first. REZN 10-21-1930, a request to rezone 3.16 acres of land located at 3202 Edgewood Road. Current zoning is RMF 1, residential multifamily 1. Proposed zoning is RO, residential office. Proposed use is a club or lodge, not for profit. Municipal Communications 2 is the applicant. This property is located in Council District 5, Ms. Crabb, and we're going to hear from planning staff first on this case.
Yes, sir. The general land use is inconsistent for planning area E. The current land use designation is public institutional. The future is single-family residential. It is compatible with the existing land uses. The property does not lie within the floodway and floodplain area. The developer will need an approved drainage plan prior to issuance of a site development permit if a permit is required. The property is serviced by all city services. There'll be no traffic impact since it's basically going to go from a club to a club and lodge. It's the same use. The site shall meet the codes and regulations of the CCG for commercial usage. There'll be no school impact. The site shall include a Category C buffer along all property lines bordered by the SFR2 zoning district. The three options under Category C are 20 feet with a certain amount of canopy trees, understory trees, shrubs, ornamental grasses per 100 linear feet, 10 feet with a certain amount of shrubs, ornamental grasses per 100 linear feet, and a wood fence or masonry wall, 30 feet undisturbed natural buffer. There's no Fort Benning recommendation, no DRI recommendation. The surrounding zoning to the north is SFR2, to the south is SFR2, to the east is SFR2, and to the west is SFR3. 60 property owners within 300 feet of the subject properties were notified of the rezoning request. The planning department received 10 calls or emails regarding the rezoning. Those 10 were in opposition of the rezoning. As far as additional information, the applicant attempted to rezone this parcel in 2018, was declined by council, and all of that information was provided to you before the meeting.
Okay, yes, it was. All right, commissioners, y'all have any questions, Mr. Renfro, regarding this case? Anyone? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, I see we have two at the podium already. If you would just give us your name and address for the record and tell us what the plan is here.
All right, my name is Rob Porterchef from 936 2nd Avenue with Porterchef and Sowers, and we represent Municipal Communications, and we're going to kind of lump both zoning requests into one presentation. And I'll introduce John Throckmorton. He's spearheading the project on behalf of Municipal Communications, and he'll present more of the detail on the tower. We are requesting approval by the Planning Committee to erect a communications tower. It's on 3202 Edgewood Road in Columbus. Most of you do recognize and know that this is the Shriners Club as you're going towards University Avenue. And to accommodate the tower, we're asking for the approval of a zoning change from RMF1 to RO, which is residential office. And we're also requesting a special exception of use for the tower. So before I bring John on, I would like to address the council and tell you why I'm in favor of it as a resident and why we hope you would be in favor of it. I live in that area. I live on the corner of Averett Drive and Hilton, and I would be served by that tower. And I'm not sure if anybody lives in that area, but if you do, you'll know that if your Wi-Fi is out, the cell coverage drops down to 1 bar, and you can't really do anything. You can't work on your cell phone, or you can't use your computer on the internet with a 1 bar if you try to hotspot something. And it's abysmal. And my alarm system is also connected to emergency services by cellular connection. So if something happens in my house, it's transmitted to my provider with the cellular service. And then, you know, when everybody comes home from the holidays at our house, everybody's on their cell phones. And if you have children, you know, that's all they do is look at their cell phones. But my wife's the same way. And everybody's reading, texting, and all that stuff. During the pandemic, there was a period of time that I worked from home. I think all of us and all the surrounding community experiences a new way of doing business, and that's working from home. All these things serve to put pressure on existing services. And I would say to my experiences, maybe like yours, maybe like other people, I think it's critical that we have access to a strong network signal, not just for entertainment and information, but we really do need this connection in case of emergencies. Whether it's 911 emergency, I mean, they use these cell towers to triangulate their services so they can more easily pinpoint where that emergency is. When you call 911, they use this triangulation, and the more effective cell network you've got, the quicker they're able to respond, and the more accurate the neighborhood and the house that they can go to. This is critical to have access to information in this day and age when there's no power in your house. If your power goes out, that zaps your Wi-Fi, and all of a sudden you're now just relying on your cell network. At my house, we're in trouble. It barely registers a bar. And my neighborhood, everybody's the same way. It's not because I have poor service. Everybody is the same way. And if you're familiar with the area, you'll also know there's an elementary school, you know, about a block or so away. And their need and reliance on emergency services is even more acute than mine, just because they've got the duty to protect a bunch of children that come in and out of their school, elementary and middle school children. And unfortunately, the fact of the matter is there's no safe place in this world. And every place needs to be protected, and every place needs to have access to emergency services. So to provide a more accurate GPS coordinate with this triangulation, that's more important to have this communications tower the way it is. You know, people are more mobile and workplaces have morphed so that people are now working out of their homes, as I previously mentioned, as much as they're working out of their office. In addition, we have, you know, we've heard about this and it's starting to come in with the 5G network, and that's going to increase the need for cell tower and communication tower utilization. So there's going to be people that are going to object to this, saying that my property value is going to go down. And I would submit to you and to them that in this day and age, and I know that area, I used to live in that area, in fact. I used to live in Mohina Woods. But in this day and age, people are, as part of their factors of considering homes, are looking at what is the cell towerage coverage. They're looking at, if there was no coverage in their area, they would probably be less likely to buy than if there was a strong cell coverage in their area, for all the reasons that I outlined before. To say that property values would go down or go up, in my mind, a cell tower can only help the property values. And then, you know, I'm going to be quite honest, that cell tower, when it's located at the Shriner Club with, you know, a multiple acre parking lot, that has an insignificant impact on property values, because there's already the Shriners Club with their huge parking lot. It's also a quality of life issue, and that is connectiveness. So
I don't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah.
can I, this is Emergency Preparedness Day, and it's 9:30, and they're setting off the alarms, so please don't be alarmed. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right. Anyway, so what we're proposing, and I'll kind of wrap it up, it's not incompatible, as the city said, with the current use of the facility. There's no real consequential environmental impact by direction of the tower. It's going to be made to look as much as possible, you know, to kind of blend in with that environment. And I will lastly, before I introduce Mr. Throckmorton, I'll lastly note that they're known, Municipal Communication is known for taking care of the properties and making them aesthetically pleasing. So this property's not going to fall into disrepair. It's going to be maintained, and it's going to be, you know, an attractive piece of property as much as, you know, one can be. So without further ado, I'll have John come and talk to you a little bit more about the specific plans.
Well, let me ask you a question. If the zoning is approved to change, and the property backs up to one of the residences, and the buffer's not in place, are they going to be required to buffer the area, put up fences, do whatever they need to do?
I think there will be a fence.
That's correct. Yeah, we will fence the compound, and then we normally or typically do put in whatever landscape buffer the jurisdiction requires. So,
Well, I mean, not just around the tower. I'm talking about the full property that, you know, it's a pretty large piece of property that backs up to a lot of homes. So, I mean, you would have to take care of that throughout the property if the zoning were to change, correct? It wouldn't be grandfathered in necessarily, the buffering.
The buffering would, because the use is not changing. So they technically would not have to re-landscape the property.
Okay, all right, that's what I
And
wanted
it's
to know.
I think it's a smaller subset of a larger property already. It's going to be near, and he can show you the layout, but it's going to be very close to the existing parking lot. So it's not, they're not cutting a new, you know, parcel out or impacting like further back.
Right, okay,
Okay?
all right.
good morning. My name is John Throckmorton. I'm the Vice President for Municipal Communications. We're an Atlanta-based tower developer at 3495 Piedmont Road in Atlanta, Georgia. So we have built hundreds of towers in 15 different states, but we're focused in Georgia and Alabama. And in fact, in Columbus, at the Columbus-Fort Benning area, we've built 8 towers to date. So very familiar with this community. I've lived here 4 times, once as a child, 3 times as an Army officer. So we've got a lot of, again, familiarity with the requirements of the jurisdiction and the community needs. So this is the 9th project that we've brought to this area. I do have a few diagrams that can kind of define the scope of the problem and why this is needed. And I could show those on the projector if that
would be fine.
kind of help. So if
Yeah,
you
we
look in
got
the center of the screen where it says proposed site, that is 3202 Edgewood Road.
Hang on just a minute, let me get you a microphone so everybody can hear it. Thank you.
I can stand right here. This was prepared by T-Mobile, so you know, separate technical analysis that they've done, and when you've got an issue like this, obviously that's 185 running through the center of that, highly trafficked, tens of thousands of people using that. We did an analysis of the residents in the area, and out to 1 mile from that dot when it comes back on, according to post office statistics, USPS, there are between 6,000 and 8,000 people in that area that are using that service. The other thing that's important to remember is these towers don't just stand alone to provide service, they're part of a network. So approval of this will help to offload other traffic from the other towers that you see there. They're all listed with that 918 number. So this doesn't just enhance service within the 1 mile area, it actually contributes to making the overall network on the eastern side of Columbus more effective. So people are going to experience improved wireless service even if they're already in one of those green areas. Typically the highest demand are happening during your rush hour periods, so 8 to 10 a.m. or 4 to 6 p.m. So again, the residents or employees in those green areas are also going to experience a little bit of an improved service. Thank you. But really the primary improvement is going to come in that yellow area on either side of the proposed site. Now, one of the first things that we do, this involves a large capital expenditure, obviously. So we always look to see, is there an existing structure nearby that can improve service without having to build a new tower. This is what we have done. There are no existing structures within 3,000 feet of this location. So I think the closest cell tower is about 0.9 miles away. If the carriers could go on that tower and improve service in that yellow area that I showed, they would do that right away rather than go through the time and expense of a year of designing and developing this location. Unfortunately, that's just not an option in this case. So in order to improve service and address all those issues that Mr. Poitashef referenced for those 6,000 people that are in that 1 mile circle, a new structure is necessary. So again, this is what the improved coverage will look like if this structure was to be approved. And you can see, so your 185 gap there is completely covered for the most part, except for just that slight yellow area, and that's probably a trick of topography. But significantly out to either side, east or west, you get a lot of improvement. And again, if we could do this with an existing structure, we would do it. It would save a tremendous amount of time and money. We're just unable to do it with the technology that we have right now. There's never a perfect location for a cell tower. We acknowledge that. This is, compared to many that I've seen, this is a very suitable location. It's got existing screening to the west there with that median. We tried to site these as far away from residences as we possibly can. That's why this property was approached originally. Rather than doing it at a church or a school or something like that, we're trying to keep it as far away from neighbors as possible, and we look for properties that have the best screening. So the building itself, for the most part, screens the tower to the east, to anybody to the east. There's a little bit of existing screening from vegetation and the building itself to the south. And then that median there along Lindsay Drive really helps with some of the screening. But as we all know, cell towers are not invisible. We're just not there yet to be able to construct these in a way that's going to make everybody happy. We do the best that we can with how we site it and then how we design the tower. This is the design that we have. It is probably around 2,500 square feet, around 1/10 of an acre, so we try to keep it as small and inconspicuous as possible. The tower itself will be a 150-foot tower. We push the carriers to get the lowest height, while at the same time providing the optimal amount of service. If they could go higher, they would, but just keeping the community and the neighborhood concerns in mind, 150 feet is the best balance between covering as many people as we can and keeping the aesthetic impact or the visual impact to a minimum. I mentioned the existing screening along Lindsay Drive earlier. This is a pretty good picture of what that looks like. Again, these trees are probably 50 to 60 feet tall, so the cell tower obviously is going to go over them. But because of how close the trees are to the houses on the other side, just the angle of that is going to reduce the aesthetic impact. It's not perfect. There's never, or very rarely, is there a perfect location for a cell tower, but this is the optimal location that we can find for this area and service that number of people. So those are sort of the technical details that I've got, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any of the members may have.
Okay, you mentioned T-Mobile. Will there be others co-locating on this tower?
Yes, it's going to be designed for 6 total tenants. AT&T has expressed interest previously. It will also have space available for Verizon should they express interest in the future. Their closest tower, I think, is also about a mile away. So we expect that there will be interest from them in the future. And then there's now a 4th carrier in the industry, and that's Dish. Dish has entered the wireless space. They have kind of replaced Sprint, who merged with T-Mobile. And you know, it's a pretty dynamic industry, so if Apple or Google or some other major tech company, or one that doesn't even exist yet, should want to locate on the tower within, you know, the next 10 to 20 years, they'll have space available to go on there.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, anybody else have any questions?
You all, I assume that this turns out to be like a long-term lease of this section of this property, is that correct?
That's correct.
What is that typically a 10-year, or is that negotiable, I guess, in every case?
In this case, the leases are for 30 to 50 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the capital expenditure is so significant that, you know, it really takes that long for the tower to become, you know,
I see.
profitable.
What's the typical construction time?
It's fairly short compared to a lot of construction projects, so we will spend about, in this case, the property is already cleared, or that section of the property is already cleared. So about 2 weeks or so to get the foundation in, a week or 10 days to let the foundation cure, and then to actually stack the tower takes about 3 to 4 days. So fairly minimal site work. There's a gap in there, again, while everything cures. And then we, you know, dress up the site with the fencing and any landscaping that's required, and that's probably another 10 days or so.
Is there a building below or power generation in case of a failure that will be attached to this?
In this case, there will be either cabinets or shelters. It's a very small compound, as you've seen, so, and just with the weather in South Georgia, you know, they'll likely install cabinets, so fairly small footprint for that. In some cases, and I don't think T-Mobile has plans for this, but a future tenant might, I'll just be honest, they may need a backup generator if power was to go out to ensure that continuous emergency cell tower service. Those are usually propane generators, but it's not something that's used unless there's an emergency.
Okay. Mr. Baker?
What was I think we all have sort of grown up knowing that property, and I have lived in Mohina Woods and on Glenbrook behind it and all around there. What was the rationale behind not using the area where the pool used to be, which was a larger section off to the east of that, on that property?
I think at the time that the lease went into effect in 2014, I wasn't part of that initial leasing process. Usually we'll defer to the landlord wherever the landlord wants. And they may have some future plans for that. Maybe the pool's going to go back in at some point, or some other development may happen. But that was the initial discussion between our leasing agent and whoever walked the site with him originally.
Okay. That answer your question, Mr. Baker? Okay. Anyone else have a question?
I have a
Ms. Brown?
question. How long has this been a shrine club? Maybe,
Ever since I can remember. No.
You know how long?
1968.
1968.
and it will continue to be a shrine club forever, or,
I could address that when it's my turn to speak.
okay.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, Clubview had its kindergarten there in 19...
Sir, you need to come to the microphone and state your name for the record, please. We're not addressing opposition yet, but if this is for information, thank you.
My name's Mike Taylor. Clubview Elementary was, at that time in 1960, had the 7th and 8th grade there, so the school was crowded. So we had kindergarten in that building, and at that time, it was a 25-yard long pool. And then later on, they made the L-shaped pool, 50 yards. So that building's been there, I know, probably 70 years, okay?
And I can attest to that because I grew up around the corner from it. All right, I'm not 70. All right. Any other questions, commissioners?
I
Yes,
have a
Ms. Brown.
question. So the Shrine Club owns this property, and they will, no? I'm just curious, is there ever a chance that this property would be sold to someone else? And how does that affect the cell tower?
I don't think anybody can predict what the Shriners will or won't do. I mean, certainly, anybody is free to sell or purchase anything that they want, you know, so long as there's willing parties. So I don't think that we're competent to tell you it'll never be sold or there'll always be a shrine club. I just don't know the answer to that.
But within the lease, there's a provision that the new owner or subsequent owner, you know, the lease is valid throughout the life of the lease.
So
the
there's
cell
actually a current lease in place.
That's what I was getting at. So once the tower goes in, it's there
Yes.
for whatever the length of the lease is. So if it were sold, then the new owner would have to agree that that cell tower would stay there, if
Yes,
it's not a
they-
shrine club.
That would be an
It's subject to
understanding.
the lease, that's right.
Okay.
Okay, does that answer your question? All right, all right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. All right, let's keep in mind, we are addressing the zoning first, and then we will address the special exception, which they've already crawled over into. Sir, if you want to come up to the podium and give us your information, we'd certainly love to hear from you. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Larry Wisnett.
You can back up. Yeah, there you go. You're good.
My name's Larry Wisnett, and I am a trustee for that property, which is owned by the holding company, not by the club, to answer the lady's question. It's the Shrine Club Holding Company. My objection to the rezoning is the loss of value of the property, because right now, it's multifamily, which could be apartments, going back to an RO. The second, we are a 501c3 nonprofit since 2015. If we lose that or have to start paying taxes, then that don't benefit what we send to the hospitals. There's a lot of other issues with this. As you see, this contract was signed 7 years ago. We have counsel hired. This stuff, and I know that's not here, this stuff was not approved by our higher stuff. Our council has all this stuff in writing, which is out of Macon, Georgia, is the Shrine Temple. And so if you got questions about the Shrine property or the club or any of the dates, I can answer those.
Okay, any questions? I think you've answered.
So
most of
you
them.
don't anticipate the Shrine Club leaving or going away? It will,
I would say at this point, that depends on what y'all gonna do, because we are definitely against the rezoning or the taxes. And I think that y'all have probably already heard from the council lady and from some of the other people involved.
I think we're a little confused because it would seem that the Shrine Club would have positively said it was okay for this to happen back in 18 or whenever it was addressed, so tell us why.
Well, I was at that meeting in 2014. In fact, I was the treasurer of the club in 2014. Nothing about rezoning was ever mentioned. None of that was ever mentioned about rezoning this property.
But somebody approved putting a cell tower on your property.
That is correct. And he is no longer a member of the club or a member of the Shrine, which was 7 years ago. And there's some legal issues with that contract, like I said, which has already been turned over to council, just to let you know. There is a lot of legal issues with that contract.
Okay, so, but we're addressing zoning here this morning on this piece of property, and we're gonna have to address the land use. If it didn't change, well, I mean, they would continue to be grandfathered in as Shrine Club.
But it can continue to be what it is.
Question, Mr. Dudley. All right, any other questions?
so who receives the money from the cell tower?
We haven't seen a dime.
But if it's built and the lease begins, who will receive the money? The Shrine Club?
Hopefully not, because we'll take other action. I mean, we don't want it rezoned. That's
Well,
not what we're
it sounds like you've got two legal battles going on that we don't need to even discuss here, sir. So let's just leave that alone.
We're trying to stop the rezoning for the two issues. We're not trying to talk about something that might happen later.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. All right. No other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to come up and speak for this case? Please do so at this time. And if there's someone that would like to speak against this case, please come up at this time. And we are talking about rezoning at this point.
Good morning.
Yes,
My
sir.
name is Don Kraft. I live at 3 Lindsay Court. I'm within the 350 square foot. I called and voiced my objection to this. As stated earlier, there are some trees in our neighborhood, and they may get 60 feet tall. You're talking about a 150-foot cell tower in a predominantly residential area. I think these are the same concerns that we brought up in 2018, and this zoning request was denied then. I and a couple of council members were shocked that it's coming back up again. And I understand that trying to persuade us not to do something is good, but it is going to be an unsightly thing. And as mentioned before, we might need more cell tower business. There's a country club down the road. Why don't you put it in the middle of the country club? That's a big open area. There's not a lot of houses right around it. But to put it right next to houses, and my house is one of those houses that I'll see, I'm very much opposed to it. I just wanted to come and voice my opinion.
Now, you're off of Lindsay Drive, right there off of Edgewood Road, correct?
I'm on East Lindsay Court. So my backyard is at Edgewood Road. So I'm straight across the street
Okay,
from the Shrine Club.
all right.
I mean, I'm within 50 feet of the parking lot, just across the street.
All right, Commissioners, do y'all have any questions of Mr. Kraft? Anyone? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else who would like to come up and speak against this case? Please state your name for the record and address, please.
How are you this morning? I'll address both of the zoning issues
And
together.
what is your name and your address,
sorry.
please?
My name is Justin DeFelici-Antonio. I live at 3013 Sumac Drive. And I'm just going to address it together as the applicants did, the rezoning request as well as the special exception. And I have a brief statement that I'll read that I've prepared. So thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Justin DeFelici-Antonio. I am a tennis coach and yoga instructor here in Columbus. I reside at 3013 Sumac Drive, which is across the street from Richards Middle School and less than half a mile from the location of the zoning issue at hand, REZN 1021-1930, and the attached special exceptions use 1931, intended to rezone 3202 Edgewood Road, the address of the Fort Benning Shrine Club, stripping it of its current residential zoning in order to install a monopole cell phone tower there. I strongly oppose the proposed rezoning and special exception because the Shrine Club is in fact smack in the middle of our neighborhood, a large residential area. That is why it is currently zoned not as RO but as RMF1, residential multifamily. Hundreds of houses in Hilton and Clubview Heights, as well as Mohina Woods encircle 3202 Edgewood Road. Additionally, dozens of residences on East Lindsay Drive, Hatcher Drive, and Lawrence Drive practically abut the Shrine Club's property, which means that any approved tower there would be effectively installed in people's backyards. Regardless of whether the monopole, or 60 feet, 100 feet, or as the applicants proposed, 150 feet, regardless of whether it were disguised as a fake tree or fenced in, such a structure would be incredibly ugly. Its aesthetics alone would deteriorate the integrity of the surrounding neighborhoods, making them much less desirable to live in. And that is my main point today, that if this rezoning were to occur, it would negatively affect the property values of the homes on streets like Edgewood Road, Gale and Erna Drives, Roswell and Linda Lanes, Sumac Drive and Cromwell, and many others that are within just a half-mile circumference from the proposed rezoning. Although the Federal Communications Act of 1996 does say that health concerns are not valid reasons for a city to deny zoning for a cell tower or antenna, property values and aesthetics are. And it's undeniable that due to public perceptions of radio frequency emitting towers as aesthetically hideous and among many groups possibly posing long-term dangers to health, more and more people are willing to pay less and less for properties in the vicinity of a cell phone tower. In fact, in a survey conducted in 2014 by the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy, quote, 94% of respondents said a nearby cell tower or group of antennas would negatively impact interest in a property or the price they would be willing to pay for it. Indeed, as real estate broker Tina Canera said in a New York Times article on this subject, quote, you can see a buyer's dismay over the sight of a cell tower near a home just by their expression, even if they don't say anything. And in a 2006 article titled, The Impact of Cell Phone Towers on House Prices in Residential Neighborhoods, published in the Appraisal Journal, which is edited by the Appraisal Institute, one of the largest professional organizations for appraisers in the world, the authors wrote, even buyers who believe that there are no adverse health effects from cell phone base stations, knowing that other potential buyers might think the reverse, will probably seek a price discount for a property located near a cell phone base station. Certainly, a cursory look at the scientific debate over health risks of radio frequency radiation, particularly, which would be in this case, 24/7 exposure by base towers, suggests that this trend of seeking price discounts over properties near towers will only intensify in the future. In 2018, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services National Toxicology Program published the results of a 2-year study in rats and mice commissioned by the FDA. The study showed 2G and 3G radio frequency exposure to be carcinogenic. The NTP scientists were able to show clear evidence of tumor growth due to the constant exposure. As Dr. Ronald Melnick, a retired senior toxicologist at the National Institutes of Health, explained the NTP study, the assumption that non-ionizing radiation cannot cause cancer or other adverse health effects other than by tissue heating is wrong. I am not a professional scientist, and I'm not here to make an argument about whether or not cell phones or towers pose health risks. I'm simply pointing out that the scientific debate over risks of cell phone base towers is still unfolding, and that there are potent reasons available today for potential home buyers to perceive, let me say that again, perceive towers as dangerous and not want to live next to them, or at the least to seek price discounts for such properties. How much discount? Of course, it depends on the buyer. But the Appraisal Institute cites cases of up to a 20% reduction in value of properties that happen to be where cell towers were erected. Regardless, a scenario involving any property devaluation would be a violation of our neighborhood, and speaking personally, unfair and distressing to my middle-class parents, Stephen and Christy DeFelici-Antonio, who have worked very hard for decades to pay for our house on Sumac Drive. I am not against cell phones. I use an iPhone most days. What I am against is cell phone towers placed in people's backyards, particularly by companies like Municipal Communications, who seek to profit while not having to suffer their towers' deleterious effects on the property values of local, hardworking people. Furthermore, I find it disrespectful that a cell tower can even be considered for placement in the middle of a residential zoning with hundreds and hundreds of houses. The law should be such that my neighbors and I do not have to spend precious time and energy opposing cell towers in densely residential areas. As an addendum, I would like to add that it is improper that the city only sent rezoning letters to houses within 350 feet of the Shriners Club. My family and all my neighbors on Sumac Drive did not receive a rezoning letter, and some still may not be aware of what is happening. Considering that a rezoning would certainly affect the value of homes outside the 350-foot radius, the rules and regulations in place regarding notification are inappropriate to this situation, and I would ask the city to take a closer look at this issue. In closing, I ask you to protect me and the hundreds of my neighbors by recommending against the RO rezoning and special exception. If you would like to read more about the aforementioned points and sources, you can find them by searching our neighborhood Facebook group organized around this issue, Preserve Our Heights. All the articles and studies I've mentioned are linked there. And I'd just like to say briefly, they mentioned the importance of having access to emergency services. My cell phone works perfectly well at 3013 Sumac Drive, and every day I see children coming from Richards Middle School and Clubview, you know, streaming videos and listening to music on their cell phone. So there's definitely no absence of service available in our area. So as you consider this rezoning, ask yourself, would I want a monopole cell phone tower in my backyard or in the backyard of my loved ones? Is this common sense? If the answer is no, be fair to us. Otherwise, you set a precedent that hurts homeowners throughout Columbus, including yourselves. All the best, and thank you for your time.
All right, anyone have any questions?
I do. Mr. Santonio, were you living in the area when this originally came up?
I think what year was, it's come
18.
up multiple times. I know it was approximately 2017 or 18 that there was a proposal to put a tower on the grounds of Richards Middle School, and we were involved in talking to the school district about that, and that was denied. In 2014, I was living out of town, I believe. I think it's been a while ago, but I was traveling internationally.
But 2018 is when this was last brought up. So were you living in your home then?
Yes.
And when the Shriners Club was approached by the cell tower company, were the residents informed that the Shriners might possibly let their property be used for a cell tower?
I don't know the details about that, but I'm sure many of the other people in my neighborhood understand. So I
Mr.
don't know.
Renfro, do you know the answer to that?
Do not. I would imagine that when they met initially in 2014 to discuss that lease, that's when that would have been talked about, but they're not required by the city or state or federal to contact any citizens.
So the Shriners, since they own that property, they talked to the cable company or the communications company. They approved it, so that's why all this became an issue, because they said yes to it, correct?
I believe that's correct. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And since it's their property, do they have to get that, do they have to get it approved if they want to lease it to a communications company?
That's not part of our issue, Ms. Brown. It's been done. The lease was signed apparently a long time ago. And the fight is internal with Shriners, obviously, so we're not going to get into that issue.
Well, if they had never approved it, this would never be a location.
Well, the Shriners obviously at one time approved it, and it's still obviously a case to be made, but according to this gentleman, there's some internal conflict with the Shriners, but we're not going to address
Right,
that.
okay.
We are addressing land issues today, okay?
Right.
And land use on this first case, and I want to get it clear.
Okay, but if it does go in, the Shriners will get the lease money.
Correct.
Okay.
No, sir. Mr., did you want to? Thank you, thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else like to come forward and speak? And please understand, we do not like repeat cases. We hear what you're saying and we're listening. I hope you all are too.
I just want to make one point to kind of answer the lady's question. This rezoning this time, we were not notified, and we did not even request the rezoning.
Well, see, I don't fully understand who "we" is where you're concerned. That's my problem. And I think it's our problem because you obviously represent the Shriners. So,
Yes, sir, but we wasn't even notified. One of the neighbors had to come and tell us about this meeting.
okay. All right. Do you have more to add, please? And state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
My name is Meredith Taylor. I live at 2878 Cromwell Drive, and I grew up in the neighborhood. It's the same house where my father grew up, and I intend to maintain the house in my family, God willing. I just wanted to speak to y'all as a remote worker. I was working in New York for an academic publisher, and when COVID hit, I had to come back home. My friend in Chicago had to do the same thing. He also lives on Cromwell Drive. So I'm coming up on my second year of doing remote work from my home, and I've never had an issue. I've never had a problem. My cell phone service is fine. I'm completely dependent on Wi-Fi and my tech, as is my friend who came down from Chicago. So I don't really think that this cell phone tower would add anything to my life as much as it would take away from the integrity of the neighborhood where I grew up. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask the audience that lives near there, how many of you have cell phones? How many of you have great service over there? Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christine DeFelici-Antonio. I live at 3013 Sumac, and that is west of the area that was notified of this rezoning. I first want to say, imagine a 15-story cell phone stabbing the sky over a 2-story residence. But if you can continue in your imagination, imagine that same 15-story cell phone towering above your residence. I want to respectfully take umbrage to Mr. Poitashev, who is speaking that he lives in the neighborhood. Averett Woods, I don't count as our immediate neighborhood. And when it is spoken about property values going up, I could only say that perhaps those studies or that argument is made by those folks who will profit from, profit in their portfolio of the cell phone tower. I am here to appeal to you as the Planning Advisory Commission. It is your job to recommend equitable and fair and compatible ways to use land here in our great city of Columbus. I appeal to your influence to recognize that no changes to this residential neighborhood has been made since the multiple times these changes have been tried to be forced down our throat. But I would also appeal to you that outside of that dotted circle, the proximity that we saw all the great technical arguments made by the applicants, just south of there on Macon Road, there are already RO, residential, commercial opportunities to erect this monopole. So I would just appeal to using the zones as you intend to get to that compatible use. And so just want to say that we've collaborated, met some great neighbors, Mr. Kraft. I've collected some of the signatures from East Lindsay Court, and they are in the back door. We did not receive that letter, but even though we're outside of that proximity, didn't get the letter, I just want to voice wholeheartedly my opposition and say, sell no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, is there anyone else that would like to add anything different than what we've already heard? Please come forward at this time.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Elliott. I reside at 2816 East Lindsay Drive. That will be right beside the new cell tower if erected. I have collected 102 signatures of my neighbors who do not and do solemnly oppose the petition to oppose the rezoning of the parcel 068-066-014, the current Shrine Club at 3202 Edgewood Road from RM F1 to RO residential office, and a request for a special exception for a cell phone facility. You may have this as a copy to look over.
Thank you.
All the roads right around me. I have been everywhere. I've gotten, nothing but opposition for this rezoning. And one thing that I did pull from the Columbus Consolidated Government page was that the Planning Board is to require development in harmony with the natural environment, to protect the rights of the property owners, and to conserve the value of the buildings, and to encourage the most appropriate use of the land, which I and my neighbors do not feel like is the most appropriate use of this land. We feel like it needs to stay residential, and it would definitely hurt the property values. On that site, it also said that decisions should not be made solely for financial gain, which I feel like is what this is all about, because unfortunately, Mr. Podeshef is, trying this, because I'm sure he's going to be able to financially gain from this. And I don't think that this will help our neighborhood at all in any way. I have also looked through the websites, millions of websites, that say that these RF waves can harm you. I would be right there, and I'm not in my family. I do not want to do that, and I don't think you would want that for your family, to be harmed by these RF waves. The lodge itself has been there. I have lived there since '63. It was a moose lodge, and before that, my neighbor said it was the Edgewood Country Club, and so I know it's been there at least, like 70 years or whatever. And it's been fine with the RMF, whatever, the one it has, multifamily residential, and it has always, and it's been tax-free. It's been fine. I don't see that it needs to be rezoned at all, because it can stay that way as a Shrine Club or in any other club, and not have to have the cell tower. That's the only reason that they're wanting to do it. So I'm definitely against it, and I have no dead zones. That was the other point I wanted to make. I have T-Mobile, and I have no dead zones. I have fine coverage. I live across the street from the worst place on I-85, 185 for wrecks, right there in that curve where you always have wrecks. I'm calling constantly. I just heard a bang. I think there's been a wreck up there. Sure enough, you hear sirens coming, and there's been another wreck. Well, I have had no trouble getting out, and having any coverage. I can ride along that road on I-85, and I also, if I see something and I have to dial 911, I have had no trouble. So I just, I do not, and also I was going to say that I pulled this from the T-Mobile site, and they say that they don't have any trouble. They have no lack of coverage, and neither do any of the 4 other major phone companies. They had pulled up some things from Verizon, and that one's Verizon over there, and that was T-Mobile. Anyway, and so they're all good according to the website, but according to other people, it doesn't sound like it. And then, like I say, I've been watching listening to podcasts and reading things on the internet. You can do all that so yourselves, and you can find out more about the RF waves. You can find out more about property values. And anyway, I just don't see any reason for it. I think there are other places. There maybe over there where the old putt-putt was, behind Roses, or over there on that side, close. I mean, something that's already zoned for, business, commercial, or whatever they need. So, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much.
Just,
Yes, ma'am.
Hope you'll think and prayerfully consider, that this could be your neighborhood next, if it's passed. Please don't.
All right. Ms. Brown, you have a question?
Yes, I have another question for the gentleman, I'm sorry, that represents the Shrine Club. Is it Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Is the Shrine Club active? How many members do you have?
Currently, we're about 45, and we have bingo 2 nights a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, so we're very active, and this is a big deal for sending money to the hospital for our children. So our tax-free status is a big deal, and the rezoning is a big deal to keep this club running, because if not, we'll have to relocate.
And you said you weren't involved when this was approved?
I was the treasurer in 2014, but there's nothing about rezoning was brought up. And I don't want to get into the stuff about the contract, because that's, if it goes further, this will come up later.
Okay, and do you actively seek new members? I mean, is this?
Yes. We're bringing in six new within the next 2 weeks.
So there's no danger of the Shrine Club going away or you selling this property?
Well, that depends on what the council decides.
Okay. Now I have a question for Mr. Portashef.
And if the use changes, I mean, the use is not going to change, so therefore your status as a nonprofit shouldn't go away, correct?
That's correct.
Unless you change your operation. Okay.
I'm just trying to understand the condition of the property that you want to put this tower on, because it appears that this property's been some sort of a club for 70 years. And if the Shrine Club is unhappy now that you want to put the cell tower there, and they decide to sell the property, are you not concerned, what could go in there? Or, in other words, it's like your landlord all of a sudden is not happy with the idea.
Well, I think that, to put it in perspective, if this lease has been in place since 2014, it's a little bit suspect to come down and object to it. I don't know what's going on in the Shrine Club. That's their business. I agree with Mr. King. This is a valid lease. It was entered into by 2 willing parties, 2 informed parties. There was counsel on both sides. In fact, the counsel he talked about in Macon was involved. So this was very well negotiated. What I like to add is this. Look, I appreciate everybody coming up and having a concern about their property values and the aesthetics, and I get it. But the fact of the matter, and I'm going to be quite blunt about it, this same people be objecting to the Shriners Club going up because it's unsightly. I mean, it is. It's a huge parking lot. There's a pool that's not even used. It's empty. And as you pointed out, they have bingo 2 or 3 times a week. There's traffic coming in and out, there's noise. That's not as much of an impact. I mean, the cell tower is not even close to impacting property values as what already has impacted it, and that's that Shrine Club. If you remember the chart or the picture that was thrown up, we're talking about a very small portion, very, very small footprint of an overall huge footprint in that residential area. You know, I don't really understand the issue of the property values, because I don't think the cell tower, as opposed to the already constructed and existing Shrine Club, is going to impact property values that much. And I want to also touch on about the health aspect of it, and I understand that too, and I would understand the concern as well, but the fact of the matter is that there's not a health issue that's posed by a cell tower. The cell tower energy is projected up, it's not projected down, and the way it was explained to me, it's essentially a flat screen TV. That is the energy is put out, a flat screen TV 150 feet up in the air. I mean, there's not a health issue. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I would agree with Mr. King from the standpoint that I'm not sure what's going on with the Shrine Club, but I don't think that it's really, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it's not really relevant today in front of you on the zoning. The only issue are zoning issues, and I respect the right of the Shrine Club to be able to bring an injunction or do whatever they want to do after, you know, the zoning is approved, and we'll handle that. And I'm sure the Shrine Club has a lot of soul searching to do and arguments to be made, but that's their issue, and I can appreciate that, but that's what they've got to grapple with, and we'll just deal with it.
One more question. When this original lease was written up, are people notified about that, just like rezoning with the Shriners?
Yeah, this is just private business, so they would not be notified.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. Does that answer your questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Portachef. All right, is there anyone else that would like to come up, add anything else to what's already been said here? My observation is the only one that lives next to the Shrine Club is the only one that came up and spoke from that region. So, yes, ma'am, you're on Cromwell.
I am old enough to have used the community pool at the Shriners Club. I went to bingo with my grandmother. I never noticed any kind, and I still live there and pass there every day. I've never encountered any bingo traffic. I've never seen it as a blight on our neighborhood. It's where I learned to drive, and it's a community center. And it's been there forever. And it's not unsightly, and I can't see it from my house.
All right, thank you. All right, yes, ma'am, do you have more to add?
Yes, sir. I'm failing to logic through the argument just made about property values with the Shrine Club, and as an existing structure, it was there when we purchased our home. It's been already established that it's been there for about 70 years. What I fail to see the logic in values for something proposed. So we're talking about home values existing and now something that will change in the environment, what's to be proposed. That is what can change the property values. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Olive. I live at 2750 Camille Drive, which is just right across the street from Clubview Elementary. My husband and I have lived there for 40 years. When we moved in that house, it was directly across the street from Hardaway High School. People said, "You're crazy." We learned you just didn't get out of the driveway at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know, you did it, but we knew that when we moved there. We chose that area for the schools, for the atmosphere, the traffic, everything that was involved in that area that we were going to pass every single day. The Shrine Club was a big part of that. Yes, it has changed through the years, as has Hardaway, Clubview, Richards, all of that neighborhood. My husband grew up on Barber Avenue, which is even closer to the Shrine Club. All of the neighborhood was established. We chose to invest and to live there and hopefully not have very disruptive things. We know that progress is going to come. We have cell phones. My husband works out of our house. All of those things, we haven't had any problem, even through the pandemic with Wi-Fi and all of that. We have what we need, and we would like to see the neighborhood stay. This is seen as a very disruptive force. We were not informed of anything. Don't get out as much as I used to. I just happened to notice the sign in front of the Shrine Club. We may not be close enough to ever be notified of anything, but are definitely impacted greatly by this. I don't think any of us in this room today know what the waves out off that tower are going to do. I think we've seen other instances where in later years they found out more facts about a lot of things. And you're sitting there with all of those children going and coming. It was turned down on the playground of Richards Middle School for a good reason, and they've been turned down in other areas. And I would very much like to see it not go up and impact our lives, not just our property value, but our total lives. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right, Commissioners, we are at a point where we need to come up with a motion and a vote, and we are talking about rezoning of REZN 1021, 1930, 3202 Edgewood Road. We're going to do that first, and we are not going to hear anything else on this exception other than the staff report, and then we'll be voting on that. So the floor is open for a motion regarding rezoning on this property. So, Commissioners. Mr. Derby.
In reference to REZN 1021-1930, request to rezone 3.16 acres of land located at 3202 Edgewood Road. Current zoning is RMF1, residential multifamily 1. Proposed zoning is RO, residential office. The proposed use is club or lodge, not-for-profit. Municipal Communications 2 is the applicant. The property is located at Council District 5. I recommend we approve it.
Okay, we have a recommendation for approval. Do we have a second? Anyone? Ms. Weekly? Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor to approve this, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. And all those opposed? 1. And I don't have anything. All right, we've got 5. I've got Mr. James Dudley who's approved, so we have 5-1 on approval. Okay. Special exception is next. Will you please review that for us first, Mr. Renfro?
Yes, sir. Special exception use request to allow for a 150-foot telecommunications facility located at 3202 Edgewood Road, Columbus, Georgia, 31907. Edgewood Road is an arterial road. It will provide adequate free flow movement. This use will be an accessory use to the property. Access in and out of the property in question will provide for adequate traffic and pedestrian safety and emergency access. Services such as water, sewer, utilities, police, and fire protection are all adequate. All mechanical equipment will be behind a 6-foot high fence. The property is surrounded by SFR2 uses. Noise, light, flare, and odor should be limited due to the nature of the equipment. The hours of operation for this use will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties in the area. The tower should not have any foreseen hours of operation, and the operation should be seamless except for outages and required maintenances. The structure's height, size, and location shall match the uses found in other RRU properties. The structure will be screened from most view sheds from pedestrians. This is Council District 5 Crab. 60 property owners within 300 feet of the property have been notified. The planning department received 10 calls and or emails regarding the rezoning. 10 people are in opposition, that as far as the phone calls and emails that we received. The applicant attempted to rezone this part, attempted to rezone and request a special exception for this parcel in 2018 and was declined by council, and that information was provided to you prior to the meeting.
That's correct. All right, thank you, Mr. Renfro. All right, we've heard all the cases involving this tower. So the floor is open now for a vote on, or a motion rather, on subject to EXCP 1021-1931 special exception. So would a commissioner like to make a motion regarding that? Mr. Baker.
When it comes to EXCP 10-21-1931, a request for special exception use at 3202 Edgewood Road, current zoning is RMF1 residential multifamily 1. Proposed use is wireless communication facilities, municipal communications 2 is the applicant. The property is located in Council District 5 Crab. I recommend that we deny this application based on significant opposition.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the special exception use. Do we have a second from anyone? From Dr. McCaskey? All right. All those in favor to deny, please raise your right hand. All right, we have 2 to deny, and all right, we need a new motion to approve because we did not have adequate to approve it. So would someone like to make that motion to approve this?
In reference to EXCP 1021-1931, a request for special exemption use at 3202 Edgewood Road. Current zoning is RMF1 residential multifamily 1. The proposed use is wireless communication facilities. Municipal communications 2 is the applicant. The property is located in Council District 5. I recommend we approve it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? All right, we have a second. All those in favor to approve, raise your right hand. And that's 3. And 2 to deny. And I have a 3rd to deny. So I am tasked with making the choice to break the tie, and I'm going to approve it. So it'll be 4-3. All right. Mr. Dudley denied it online. Okay, we move to the next case. It was a motion to approve both cases. Yes. To approve the rezoning? Yes, sir. Rezoning and the special exception. All right. Next case is REZN 1021-1932. This is a request to rezone 8.61 acres of land located at 6672 Billings Road.